Dobro, kako si ti? Nakon prvog dana. Aha, dobro. Držim fige, sam vidim. Može, super. Onda, ok, ja sam na Zoomu, pa se ne moram čuti, vidim. Ćao, Bog. Hej. Ok. Ne čujem.
Evo sad.
Ok, a kako ti mene čuješ? Jer ja sam sad skinula slušalice. Ja tebe uopće sad ne čujem.
Kažem, govori još malo.
Ok, evo, govorim još malo. Da čitam malo na engleskom jeziku. Da ti pustim klip da vidim da se čuje neki. Evo, samo tren. Ovo je jedan od jednostavnijih. Ali to se može pojačati. Je ovo dobar zvuk? Dobro glasnoća? Molim?
To je bila sad glasnoća od tvog kompjutera, to ne dizaj, nego samo govori još malo. Ja mislim da
evo, govorim još malo i najbolje da ti pričam što sve čitam i kakve sve probleme imam s kompjuterom, jer će mi se i dalje čuti svi klikovi ako ne budem držala slušalice, a mislim da ove slušalice iz nekog razloga ne funkcioniraju kako treba. Ja mogu jedino malo vikat ako to pomaže.
Ne, mislim sad je isti problem koji smo imali, to znači da čut ćemo klikove, ali ja mislim da ćete lakše razumjeti ovako nego kako što je bilo jučer.
Ajde, daj da probam još jednom sa slušalicama. Čekaj. Kako sad funkcionira? Je li sad tiho?
Sad je bolje.
A kako? Pa to su iste slušalice, u čemu je problem?
Dobro, jučer sam malo digao još voljum u prostoru.
Dobro.
Šta, imala si lase, mislim da si imala spuštene, pa možda one.
Misliš da je to zbog toga, zbog kose?
Ne znam.
Baš dobro da sam se sjetila da je dignem danas, ali a gle, ako je ovo bolje, meni je to draže, jer da se ne čuje sve i, znači, ja radim od doma, ako neko zvoni, ako neke stvari...
Ja mislim da je sad puno bolje, tako da nešto se desilo da je bolje.
Ok, super. Ako ovo funkcionira, meni to... Znaš, mislim da ne moram držati ovako, jer moram prezentaciju pokazivati dok čitam, pa ću se pogubiti još dok cijelo vrijeme nemam...
Ne, ja mislim da ćemo biti ok sada.
Ok, super, dobro.
Super.
Ok, ajde, isključit ću samo kameru pa i zvuk, pa kad krene da budem...
Hvala.
Može, pozdrav. A u stvari, čekaj samo da pitam još nešto. Vezano uz ove druge videe, kakav je zvuk, je li preglasno ili da stavim jače, je li onaj zvuk koji sam malo prije pustila, je li to bilo, dobro se čulo?
Ja, jes, ali testiramo, možemo još nešto.
Ok, ajde, jedan po jedan jer su 4. Dakle, ovo je 1. Jel čuješ?
Ne.
Jel preglasno?
Ne, sad ne čujemo videa.
Aha, samo malo, nisam...
Treba šerat, znaš? Share computer audio.
Je, znam šerat, samo sam sad shvatila da to nisam napravila, samo tren. Share screen. ali host disabled participation screen sharing.
Is true. There we go. Imaš.
Ok, samo tren. Dobro, to je prvi. Aha, ne, griješim, samo tren, opet ponovo. Smokar. Ali nisam šerala, samo sam, trebam iz početka. Share computer sound,
Da se ne osjećam tako, osjećam se kao da se zovem Emanuela. Živim u Sarajevu i...
Jel okej?
Yes.
Dobro, to je jedan, samo tren. Stop sharing. Sad drugi. Ok, sad mi je uključen computer sound stalno. Ok, to se čuje?
Ajde, ok.
Dobro. Sad treći.
Dobro, na kraju sam uzela...
To se čuje?
Da, i to se čuje.
Ok. I sad četvrti. Oh, sorry. Ja ne znam, jesam šerala. To se čuje?
Yes, i to se čuje.
Ok, super. No, hvala.
Višnjam. Hvala.
Dobro, ajde, vidimo se poslije.
So, dobro jutro vsem. Kaj? A sem zasral. Aha, tako. Ne, tako. Ja. Dobro jutro vsem na netu, tukaj v dvorani. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. It's a strange situation here. According to the decree of our government, the public gatherings are limited to 10 people. So this is probably the first scientific symposium conference where we have to drive the potential audience away. Quite symptomatic to the state of reasoning and thinking in today's situation. Nevertheless, we will continue our symposium today with another key speaker, Višnja Kačić-Rogošić. She is a professor at the University of Zagreb. She will be presenting a contemporary case of community theater in Croatia. So, Višnja, please.
Good morning, everybody who is there and those who are online. Can you hear me? Can you see the presentation? Okay, then I can start. So the name of the presentation is Keeping the Promise of Community, and I'm going to talk about the repercussions of certain communal tendencies from the 1970s in several performances on the Zagreb independent theater scene from the last decade. So from 2010, from 2000 until 10 until 2020, approximately. So to start, is it moving or not? Oh, let's see. Okay, it's switching. Zagreb non-institutional theater scene provides elements of communal experience reflected in creative process, performance, or reception, both in the obscure and well-known theater practice, in memories and archives, in retrospective interpretations and strategic, straightforward activities, as well as in various periods of its recent history. Although one can find under-investigated examples of the theatrical exploration of this field in the first part of the 20th century, for example, in certain formal experiments of Družina mladih in the early 1940s, it particularly developed amid the 1970s rediscovery of collective power on the alternative scene, when even groups with clearly individualized creative tasks avoided naming specific authors, which emphasized the community of performers or authors, and interaction with the audience was almost expected, which emphasized the community of participants. It was perhaps most elaborately realized in the practice of the neo-avant-garde experimental theater group Kugla Glumište, in the words of their 1979 manifesto statement. Kugla discovers images, symbols, and stories that wish to be the promise of community. That was a direct quote. The following paper will attempt to chart the contemporary repercussions of that communal legacy on the same independent theater scene by analyzing 4 projects from the 2010s. On Community by Shadowcasters from 2010 and 11, 55 Plus by Montagestroj from 2012, The Love Case of Fahriapă by a group of authors from 2017, and Conversing by Four-Handed from 2019. Namely, with different motivation, aesthetic goals, production levels, and modus operandi, they do not necessarily refer to the term, but do focus on a group of interconnected individuals united by means of cohesion, particularly in relation to the audience. Thus, the analysis will especially explore interactive and participatory potential of each of the performances, employed with the aim of forming a social organization, exploring the political potential of the community or its practical and ideological background. If there is a common starting point, it can be found in their positive perception of the community, whether it is proposed as a probable outcome, a question, or wishful thinking. As Zygmunt Bauman observes somewhat ironically, community, we feel, is always a good thing. The positive side of the spectrum is marked by the belief in the successful establishment of performative unity of all those involved in a theatre performance. Up to a certain point, it is a natural outcome of the 20th century experiments in that field, which completed the cycle from devising fresh models to their practical testing, from envisioning ideals to accepting attainable versions, from subverting conventions to inaugurating new conventions, and even joining the mainstream. Some form of communal theatrical experience is thus nearly presumed, or at least less problematized, and exceeds the presenting material or serves as its denominator, obtained like a previously existing pattern and applied with a lot of optimism or acceptance of its shortcomings to the new circumstances. Accordingly, a theatre performance, the love case of Fahriapı, provides a direct link to that neo-avant-garde heritage. It was created by a group of authors of whom Zlatko Burić-Kićo and Damir Bartol-Indoš once belonged to Kugla Glumište, even more so upon the disintegration of the group in the early 1980s. They respectively represented its so-called soft and hard fractions. In addition, the project is an homage to another deceased Kugla member and multimedia artist, Željko Zorica Šiš, and therefore rendered in a form of performative dialogue with his artwork. In particular, it is based on 3 comic pages from 1984, The Love Case of Fahriapı, Mummies, Ed Killerhead, with references to his other works such as partially edible installations, experimental film Cabbage Clairvoyant, or the reflections of his fictional alter ego, Dr. Hans Christian Zabludowski, published in 2 fantasy bestiaries. It doesn't therefore come as a surprise that the project relates to Kugla's opus on the level of content, dramaturgy, spatial organization, and highlighted media. Zorica's motives are incorporated into the mixture of everyday scenes and surreal fiction, which the group established in the mid-1970s. Furthermore, the production is shaped in 4 spatially and thematically separated segments, of which some are additionally divided into mutually independent parts. Post-dramatic interpretation of Zorica's comic plots, staged on 2 more conventional scenes, is followed by a succession of performances on small scaffold stages representing various lotzi, and a musical finale in an empty hall. Along with acting, it features music, which is a possible nod to the famous Kugla band which accompanied all of their shows, and strong visuality, interweaving live acting with drawing, film, installation, and projections of comics, which is adapt to the multimedia opus of Željko Zorica, of course. Most importantly, within the context of this insight, the love case of Fahriapı continues to rely on its audience, leaving the impression of a collection of procedures designed to persuade the spectators to renounce that status in favor of the physically active or more conscious participation. On the general level, the fragmentary disposition of particular scenes is surpassed by a collective processional body of audience members, led by one or more performers from one performance locus to another. The invitation to join it is issued calmly, but cannot hide the implicit ultimatum: join the group or miss the performance altogether. On the level of particular segments, the authors interlace different channels and intensity of inclusion by directly addressing the viewers, demanding their alert intellectual engagement, and openly showing or presenting the performance content. For example, in the central sequence on scaffold stages, they practice Brechtian abolishment of the fourth wall convention to create a firm connection between the stage fiction and the reality of the auditorium. To quote the official announcement, "Come to the show," in the words of Ed Killerhead, "to see when you're already watching." At the same time, all the segments appeal to the sensory experience of the recipient with the ever-present musical performance, which alternates in force with active parts, occasionally transforming a theatre piece into a concert. The love case of Fahriapı begins with forceful tones, continues as a dynamic background of our experience and finishes with a full-blown acoustic environment which envelopes everybody. And here I would like to show the first video. Sorry. Sorry, I have to check if you can hear. Can you hear the sound? Okay. So I'm going to show several clips from the whole performance, just to present, so that you can see different places where the performance is happening, because they're completely different from the point of theme and different comics that they refer to, and the way they engage the audience as well.
Pođimo. Ja nisam ulazica, ali će nam zuzot što da zna pomoći da uđemo njihov mrak. Pođemo kestenki, rejčići moji šlagasti. Idemo sada. Ne okrećite se. Velika se praznina iza mene odigrava. Krenimo smrtne točke. Jer prije li ova noć iščili, zloupotrijebit će se sve što smo ikada bili. Prika je za bricu, prika je za bricu, prika je za bricu, prika je za bricu! Znate li onaj stih? Da. Na mostu se rosa sa mačjom glavom ljubljala iskosa. Ne. Ne? Ne. Ne? Ne. Ne. Ustavim tada u 3:30. Sjedem za volan kombija i u 5 ja sam već na istoru. U 8:30 eto mene u polju. Sam čekam je za igre kad neko spomene neku posreću. Mogao bih vam odmah pričati 3 dana. Bez prestanka.
Okay, to continue with the presentation. Okay. Am I back with the presentation? Yes. If the neo-avant-garde theatrical investigation of community highlighted its potential in the creation of a theater performance, and vice versa, it has also contributed to the precaution with which some contemporary theater makers return to that concept. One bears in mind the difficulties in maintaining the popular neo-avant-garde model of the community of equals, and a large number of theatre collectives which dispersed under the pressure of the uncomfortable tension between common values and individual freedoms. Thus, on an abstract level, certain positive insecurity or even amusing skepticism can be applied to the very idea of community, for example, in relation to the motives and possibilities of its realization, as well as sustainability. When tackled with curiosity and or critically, the community cannot avoid becoming one of the thematic or formal problems of the project. Such reserved and questioning attitude is demonstrated by the production platform Shadowcasters, which opened the 2010 decade with the performance trilogy on community, quote, examining the community and communal experience through multiple reasons for the establishment, energy, and socio-political conditions and changes, end quote. In the opening part, explicit contents from 2010, presented in the form of 6 interlaced audience journeys through the theatre building, each led by a pair of actors, the authors focus on creating what they called the arranged community. The second performance, a Revolution Masterclass from the same year, again a group psychophysical interaction between the audience and the performers, although mostly in a single joint space, instigates the re-evaluation of the community through its decomposition and reestablishment, while the finale, male, female, female, male from 2011, divides its basic energies, male and female, only to confront them in the laboratory theatrical dialogue. Regardless of the formal variations, all the performances share several specificities important for the main topic of this article. And first of all, the community that Shadowcasters question is a theatre community. With the exception of a few fragments, it is placed in the spatial and temporal context of a theatre performance, although it can occur in working rather than performance spaces within a theatre building, and is limited to the participants of a theatrical event. Throughout the particular segments, the authors thematize various contemporary group identities such as family, nation, gender, a circle of acquaintances or intimate friends, or even a dance group, generally relating their experiment to the wider social circumstances. However, they eschew firm connection with any of the specific examples or models of community, thus preserving a more neutral character of the problem. Furthermore, described laboratory conditions allow for the fully inclusive nature of the trilogy, which strives to invite the recipients into all or most of the phases of the complete project. They attend what they call the opening night. It's the first performance in a sequence, first of all, and a symbolical starting point of the devising process, not to witness the performance, but to join the discursive search for common interests upon which the performance would be built. They are invited to support the creative process as the necessary rehearsal audience because, quote, without the participating audience, there is really no performance, end quote, and are eventually using various mechanisms placed into the very center of the artwork. Namely, the development of each of the performances in great part consists of gathering the audience into one or several smaller or larger groups in order to lead them through a number of performative tasks. Share a secret with your partner, learn a group dance, an a cappella song, take a collective bow, meditate on flying, give an opinion, enter a conversation, etc. In accordance with the author's conviction that the evolution of the individual is the precondition for the formation of a sustainable community, the tasks tend to have more or less emphasized emancipatory character. The outcome is doubly rewarding, and I find this very interesting because they perceive themselves as the underdogs and they don't try to patronize the audience, in fact. So, on one side, it enables the performers to catch up with the audience, who are conventionally more experienced in their recipient roles than the actors are in whichever role they embody, and thus balance out the general inequality of the temporary theatrical community. At the same time, it tests one's decision to become and or remain the member of that same body by examining its particular qualities, the vulnerability or protection of the individual within a group, features with which a group might identify, the way it chooses to present itself or treat the non-members. Finally, if shadowcasters are comprehensive when it comes to setting up an experiment, they are equally open when it is time to provide the results, since the trilogy progresses towards more focused problems rather than clear solutions. Although the tendency is visible in all its parts, it is perhaps most evidently presented in the last one, which is constructed as 4 different performances in the form of elaborate group discussions. Performance by male performers, intended respectively for male and female spectators, and performance by female performers, intended respectively for female and male spectators. Male-female, female-male thus lucidly suggests whether the circumstances for creating any, for example, gender-determined community are favorable or not. Its realization still remains the matter of our individual responsibility. So I'll show another clip and see if it's ready to share. Can you hear the sound? Oh, I'm sorry.
Osjećam se kao
Can you hear the sound? Or okay.
da se zovem Emanuela. Živim u Sarajevu i prezivat ću se uskoro Duboveček. Dubovečak, mali Dubovečak i imat ćemo koliko djece? 5-6. Otiće mi linija. Dobro, i živjet ćemo... Dogovorit ćemo se kasnije živjeti. I ja sam danas zakasnila na tu...
I to pravi.
Znači ni ti nisi. Jel ima koji muškarac ovdje?
Koji sam kurac, a?
Ima.
Ti si.
Dignite prst.
Ti si. 2, 3, 4, 5.
Evo, ima i više.
Evo, ima i...
Odjednom, evo, sad je lako kad su se prvi pravi javili. Sad je lako biti
Treba biti
muškarac.
prvi.
Da biti prvi. Evo, samo me zanima jedna stvar. Muškarci ste. Jel možete vi prihvatiti tu cijelu priču koja u zadnje vrijeme ide, a to je da smo mi muškarci krivi za sve, za cijeli ovaj svijet i za sve ovo što ide krivo? Je li to moguće? Da su to muškarci krivi, da je ovo muški svijet, da je ovo naš svijet i da tu smo sve mi krivi za sve što krivo ide u ovom svijetu?
Samo ovi koji su se javili.
Naravno, samo muškarci.
A šta?
Ko to kaže da je tako?
Molim?
Ko to kaže da je tako?
To nisi nikada čuo nigdje da je ovo muški svijet.
Kad bi se
A?
samostalno...
Se slažeš? Oprosti.
Pa mislim teško da je to tako.
Pa drago mi, reci onda nešto u obranu ili kontru tome. Ako možeš ili ako ne
Ja
siluj.
kažem da se ja ne slažem. Mislim,
Ne slažeš se.
Nemoguće da samo jedna kao grupa može bude odgovorna za nešto se dešava u čitavom svetu.
Da, mislim, svi ovi muškarci pa i ovaj tu gospodin u odijelu, što se pravi važan, mislim da budemo ono iskreni, su rođeni od majke. Možda su to majke krive.
Okay, to go back to the presentation. The same problem-based approach is perhaps most appealing in relation to a specific community, one that is achievable, existing, or even desirable, just not unconditionally. Therefore, starting from a more concrete communal experience, or a lack of one, a number of artists strive to discover its optimal or at least more functional version, as well as the road to its actualization. As their name suggests, and their manifesto statement confirms, the artistic organization for opening new fields of theater communication, four-handed, is strongly preoccupied with this sphere of research. Specifically, the organization is dedicated to the, and I quote, realization of refined communication, and always wants to gather a group of participants, end quote, only to anchor them to their immediate surrounding with a socially engaged performance, one that four-handed defines as, quote, co-acting, co-dealing with what is around us, end quote. Even more so, meticulous examination of means and ways to achieve performative community serves as a distinguishing methodological feature of their work. Those interests present the premise of the fourth episode in their artistic exploratory cycle Distance, which is inspired by the crisis of interpersonal relationships caused by the Croatian War of Independence. A series of performances was initiated by the theater director Marina Petrovic-Liker in 2017 with the investigation of the post-war conditions in the small Baranja municipality of Darda in East Slavonia. The authors used economically and socially devastated and politically, nationally, and humanly deeply divided place as the paradigmatic example of insurmountable barriers in communication in contemporary Croatian society. Hence, the performance significantly named Conversing chooses both thematic and methodological approach to the subject, which is additionally elaborated by the juxtaposition of documentary material, audio recordings of the conversations between the authors and women from Darda, and its theatricalized reflection. Thematically, the recorded conversations establish the outline of the distances, i.e., the ambivalence between the necessity and the impossibility of overcoming described social crisis and continuing promising coexistence, while forehanded implores the authenticity of the media to affect the performers and the audience. Expectedly rendered in the discursive format, performative reaction to this problem is presented by 6 female performers who attempt to maintain a functional conversation. One of the key characteristics of their approximately 2-hour interaction is the difficulty with which a series of monologues fuses into a polylogue, and the easiness with which the participants of that polylogue misinterpret each other or take opposing sides. And although that jazz discussion, and this is their original term, which refers to a live group improvisation with a number of performance tasks in relation to the living material. So although that jazz discussion does not provide clear story, characters, or even time and space, and these are all the matrices that we expect to find in a theater performance, the distance between women symbolically gathered around one table and trapped in a vicious circle of miscommunication is transparent. If the change is possible, it seems that it can be instigated by the recipients gathered in an equally symbolic way in a wider circle around the performers, who forehanded recruits as witnesses. This is also their term, namely as the precondition for the understanding and unity which is out of reach of performers. The authors encourage the audience to develop analytical insight, accept conscious coexistence, and feel responsibility, but also warmth. They juxtapose different perspectives. They share the space and do not ignore the spectators. They personalize invitations to the performance and blur its temporal frame by inviting audience members to join them in an informal conversation over drinks afterwards. They hope that, quote, after you spend an hour or two noticing something in a different way, it will continue to vibrate even when you leave, end quote. So I'll show another clip, and first I have to apologize because I submitted a different example in a proposal, which was the third installment of the cycle. In the meantime, they represented the fourth one, which in an even better way represents what I wanted to talk about. So they have some common elements, and I didn't steer away from the main subject very much. But this was just a better way of presenting the main subject. And also I have to apologize for the video, which is the only one that they could provide. What you will, I think, try to hear, because the sound is very poor, is one example of this jazz discussion that they have. So 6 performers, one is going to open the window, so 5 of them are involved in a polylogue where they continue each other's monologues by starting from the last phrase that they hear, but they change the subject completely, and the tone and the character and the situation. So let me try and find it on my, I'm sorry,
koliko su moje. Mislim, zna se čije što. Ovo je moje bilo. To sam ja kupila. Imala sam neke stvari od mame, imala sam neke stvari od tate, nešto sam dobila. Većina stvari je bila moja.
Neka su stvari i zajedničke.
Ja.
Ne su izgledali. Kažu ti zajedničke. Tolike godine ste živjeli zajedno.
Zna se što je čije. I zna se otkud je došlo. I zna se i zašto je to sve tako puklo u pičku materinu, mama.
Smiri se.
Mirna sam, savršena sam.
To vidi.
Ostala unatoč tome da sam zapravo umirala od straha. Nevjerovatno je to kako kad je najveći strah preplavi da zapravo potpuno ostaneš u njemu. Šok. Ja sam mislila da je to neka viroza.
Stvarno sam mislila da je viroza. Ali ne, majke ti mila, njega kad boli da mu je zanoktica nije viroza. Nije viroza, nije zanoktica, nego je teška smrtna bolest. Bože sveti, ne možeš ti to. On je u bolnici, tamo na hitnoj, ma nema drama. Ja imam temperaturu 37, ali kad on ima 37 temperaturu, onda dođe da sam. Mislim, ne može biti tako. Ali nije, naravno da ga cijelo može biti. Ali mi treba 37 i sad imam samiti i ja imam ga tamo doma plaća, kuha i... Kuha i peri i spremi.
Spremila sam. Ne, ja nemam papire. Da, naravno da nemam papire. Jer su svi papiri i tamo gdje ja ne mogu ići. Ali svi znaju da je to moje. Ne, kaže ona meni, hajde, pokažite papire. Da. Ne govorim, ali ovo je moja kuća, ovo su moje stvari.
Dobro, pa pusti, sad je to stvarno prošlo.
Okay, to go back to the presentation. As opposed to the subtle intervention into everyday life, which is conducted by Four-Handed, performance group and production platform Montagestroj advances with much more urgency and force. In addition, their project with the suggestive title 55+ is the only among those presented in this text, regardless of the more or less evident social function or the legacy of the same kind, which is categorized as community theater with a more direct utilization and a clear goal. That status of applied theater project provides a better understanding of its key features, as recognized by Key Sepskamp, and I quote, the exchange of the ideas between the participants and leaders, actors, the connection between the content of the performance and the life surrounding of the participating community, problematization of issues which are of direct importance for the community where the performance or the workshop are happening, and encouragement of the audience to directly participate in the event during or after the performance. End quote. Therefore, the comprehensive enterprise targeted at the population aged 55 years and over thematizes its position in contemporary Croatian society. According to the author of the concept and theater director Borut Šeparović, members of that age group are considered less potent and rendered invisible. Therefore, the multi-phase project is designed to call attention to their forgotten potential. To enable the circulation of ideas that will result in the performance 55+, years are not important, and a documentary film consumed, the project starts with the week-long interviews with the possible future participants and continues with workshops for the invited 99 non-professional performers. Divided into 4 media categories: theater, movement, new media, and group discussion, they aim at activating the participants and providing them with new skills while at the same time fusing the individual members into a micro-community. Interaction with the audience, however, is tackled in different ways with varying success. On one side, a long final theatre performance does indeed provide a voice for each of its 44 performers by giving them the opportunity to present the most important minute in their lives, as well as give an engaged speech on current social problems. So you can see the photo of that, of one of the people speaking in the background. I'm sorry, which is intended for the audience, of course. However, as noted by the theatre scholar Una Bauer, our ethic responsibility to hear and react to those voices is significantly weakened by the representational frame of the theatre, which transforms soul-stirring reality into dramaturgically monotonous line of approximately 1 minute long confessions, followed by the equal number of mostly uninventive speeches by non-professional speakers. On the other side, a 2-month-long joint preparations for the grand finale succeed in creating age-determined community of project participants who, for example, initiate additional socially engaged activities or offer suggestions for their manifesto. Since 55 Plus is not presented as a one-time endeavor, but is offered as a model project, this is the term by Boris Šeparović, which can be transferred to another context with different participants, it thus opens a parallel channel for the dispersion of communal experience. In his words, quote, "I believe that art has great potential when it is created in firm correlation with the transformation of the local community. If we want to consider the power of political theatre at all, it has to take from the community and give back to the community." And I'll show a video of the first part of the performance. So these are confessions which are approximately 1 minute long because each of the participants has as many seconds as the years that they have. And in the second clip, you'll see in the upper left part of the video a countdown. So time running out, life running out, seconds running out, etc. And at the end, you hear a siren, which is a signal for them to leave, whether their story is finished or not.
Ne može naći posao. Radeći u STS Metalu kod gospodina Todorića u Zagrebu, moj suprug dolazi kući, nakon 3 dana mučenja sa odlukom, kaže mi ja to ne mogu. A trebao je podijeliti 17 otkaza. Kao i uvijek, ja sam ga podržala u njegovoj odluci i otišla spavati. Pas me je probudio dodirujući me njuškom i šapama. Ja sam čula nekakav čudan, meni nepoznati zvuk iz dnevne sobe. Otrčala sam tamo, a moj suprug je ležao na podu. Cijelim tijelom se dizao i spuštao uz jedan grozan.
So to conclude, in spite of different reasons, means and ways of confirming, reaching or testing performative unity, analyzed performances share certain characteristics. Firstly, the perception of community in all of the examples, and even some creative processes, is extensive, not limited to the hermetic group of authors, but open to those conventionally perceived as the recipients. The invitation to participate varies in the level of its directness and occasionally leads to the immediate establishment of the famous auto-poetic feedback loop, while at other times inspires potential future project participants. However, it always remains an invitation, although sometimes issued with no theatrical alternative. I remember an elderly visitor of explicit contents who refused, for example, to leave with the actors, to leave the auditorium where the beginning of the performance was happening, and was left completely alone. So there was no performance to see. So that was the only engagement that was left for that person who was sitting in the audience to think whether they should have left or not. So to go back to the test, accordingly, regardless of the emphasized bodily presence, physical invasiveness is steadily avoided. And if any aggression towards the audience appears, it is in a familiar and mostly acceptable form of, for example, intellectual provocation, boring speech, or loud music. Somatic experience is enriched with the mental engagement of the spectator, who is respectively in different shows challenged on both thematic and formal level, as well as hers or his emotional involvement. In the attempt to achieve the latter, authors can again rely on the content, for example, the documentary material of the performance, as well as creative methodology. For example, the assumption about the increased personal investment and personal risk of the performer co-author in the devising process. In both cases, it results with the additional responsibility on the part of the spectator, who is reminded to respect the story or the effort and encouraged to respond in kind. For example, as Una Bauer reminds us, the audience of 55 plus years are not important, are burdened with a guilt trip if they leave and once again deprive the ordinarily voiceless performance of their voices. What the artists aim for is, however short, total joint experience, which would not only result in the temporary aesthetic community defined by theatrical conventions, but potentially remain as a pledge for future recognition, connection, or even closeness between those who shared it. To quote Petković-Liker, that sharp cut which happens in the classical theater when you see, clap, and leave is sometimes good and needed, but for me wasn't correct. This somehow doesn't end. End quote. So that's the end of my presentation. Thanks. Your sound is muted, so just I can't hear anything. No, I wasn't asking for it. I wasn't asking for additional clapping. Just I thought that you mentioned something.
It's good to have a response. This is the community theater.
Yeah.
About, yeah. Well, to start the discussion, we were talking about the relationships between the performance and the audience that is in foreground of all these projects. You were talking also about the equality of theater community. But as we know in theory and in practice, this equality is hardly ever achieved because performers are the ones that have the concept, that have the idea, that are basically creating the situation that enables them. Is there in those projects, was there some breakthrough in this question, or mainly things basically stay the same in a way that performers have a dominant role and that this hierarchy is hardly broken?
Well, first of all, they don't really, not all of them try to deal with that issue of equality at all. It's something that is a residue of the 1970s, I would say. It's not really an issue in contemporary performance art. Just the idea that we can all be together in at least a less hierarchized version of, or just in community which has a different sort of hierarchy is enough. So I think that the idea of equal, of any kind of equality that is complete, like from the quantitative point of view, like we all have the same amount of power, and from the qualitative point of view, like we all come from the same position, sort of. We are all actors, we are all directors, this is something that is abandoned, and from multiple reasons, you know, also because the contemporary artists want to allow everybody to choose their own position. Maybe they don't want to have all that power. Maybe they don't, and still they want to be equal. Or maybe they don't want to be present in all of those creative positions. So this is something that they don't deal with. And that said, there was one example which I find interesting, and I emphasize it in this presentation. Shadowcasters actually tried to present a reversed situation. They felt that they, as the performance, are in a less privileged position in comparison to the audience, because audience, they know what to do and they can never be wrong. They just sit there and listen, and they can't make mistakes. They're always good audience in that sense. Even when they fall asleep, they're just bored. It's your fault that they fell asleep. Not to mention then that they even have performances where they made the audience fall asleep. But they said we wanted to put them in our position where they can be wrong, where they have to participate, where they can change something, and if they decide not to change it, it's their own fault or their own accomplishment, whichever way you want to hear it. So I would say it's not something that is a predominant trend anymore in the question of equality at all. But when it is questioned at all, it can be questioned from the new perspective, from the interesting point of view, I would say.
Do we have some more questions from anyone from the internet or here in the hall? Then I would like you to clarify one thing. Maybe I just didn't get it well. On your presentation, you had written that one of those projects was fully inclusive from creation to reception. So how was it inclusive in the creation process?
Partially inclusive. That was Shadowcasters. When they started working on the project, they did the first performance, which they named Opening Night. And they actually invited the audience just to give them idea what to deal with. It would be like a session of group dealing with devised theater. We all come together and then we sort of do a kind of a community, like a group brainstorming, only it was done with, I'd say, 200 people sitting in the audience, and we were all invited to do whatever and to give any suggestions. So after that, obviously, they regrouped and they worked alone. But then again, when they had partial versions of the first performance, which is called explicit contents, what they needed is some kind of rehearsal audience with which they could build up their stories and see how they function. And they publicly invited rehearsal audience to participate in those rehearsals. Some of those, so that they could lead them through journeys through the theater and interact with them and give them tasks and see how that works, or maybe different tasks, etc. And so some of those stories I went through 2 or 3 those rehearsal stories, and some of them were fully finished, or they seemed fully finished. Some were just trying out different aspects, so you felt as if you were really part of an ongoing rehearsal, and that lasted for a while. And then they had the finished performance, explicit contents, where we actually participated in those journeys. So this is something that was specific for the first of those sequences. And for the second one was made in Belgrade, so I can't say whether they had a similar approach. And the last one did not have that kind of several phases.
Interesting.
So that's
Now, maybe for the last question, the different situation with 55 plus,
Okay.
where we have the audience that is sort of asked to join the performance as performers. So this becomes a sort of a process of individual and of course community therapy in a way. It is more targeted, I think, to a part of the audience that takes part. How was it with this project when it was actually performed in the end, with the relationship to the audience that obviously came to this, and whether this group had a follow-up, sort of, did they monitor or did they do interviews with the people that took part in the project? And was this change not only temporary, but long-lasting?
Okay, so well, sorry. Oh, so to answer the first question, well, and I tried to emphasize that in the presentation, perhaps it wasn't clear. I'm sorry about that. I apologize for that. So the first thing is I think that what they initially tried, and that was to stir the audience, to push them to react in a way, leave the auditorium, be better in their everyday lives in a proper Brechtian way. We are going to preach to you, or in a way, present you different perspectives, and then you're going to approach that critically, and that is going to help in your everyday attitudes to whatever else you're doing, or to the elderly people, or perhaps later on in your life, etc. So I would say that this part of their approach to the audience was rather unsuccessful. I can say that from the point of view of the theater scholar, and also from the point of view of the spectator, who was sitting there feeling sorry for those people, because they were actually completely boring, but at the same time, with those boring stories, they were completely real. They spilled their lives there, and at the same time, and I was not respecting that in enough. So yes, I did feel guilt trip over that. I felt tremendously guilty, but I couldn't help them. It was just an unsuccessful dramaturgical frame for this sort of performance. But I would say that it has more potential in future engagement of any kind of audience or similar groups, because what they succeeded in is to create a small community of people who participated in the project. In addition to this, what I mentioned, so one performance and the documentary, which you can see that they're being filmed. So this is the material for the future documentary. They also organized parties, they organized certain demonstrations, and I'm not sure if they still keep in touch or not. That was a couple of years ago, but they had extra activities, and you can see the whole web page that gives you like a chronological list of all the activities and photos and discussions, manifestos that they wrote about themselves, etc. So it was given as a sort of model. So it was proposed, and I would say also in a tradition of the 1970s collectives, which very often proposed their mechanism and organizational models as something that we could use in our everyday life. So yes, we are a community of equals, like the Living Theatre. Let's organize the whole country or the whole world in this way. Yes, we live in a freely, and we share everything. And let's do this in everyday life and not just in theater. I mean, taking that over obviously from the historical avant-garde, and that rejection of the autonomy of the artistic work. So I would say that this is the potential of that project. Although I never heard that it was realized again, that it was taken. But the model is there. Everybody can use it. The same way that when you read Paradise Now from the Living Theatre, at the very first page, you have that suggestion by Malina and Beck that anybody who wants this can use it and put it in a different way, and they give it to the world as their gift. So I would say that this is a good way for that this is the positive aspect of that performance, something that was not realized but could be realized. I'm not sure if I answered all your questions, but
yes, you have. Thanks. Do we have another question? Online, offline? No. So Vishnia, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Looking forward to read more in the journal. I see that Anna Vartovec-Beno is already with us. So Maja Murnik cannot join today, so we'll skip her presentation and go directly to Anna Vartovec-Beno, ethnologist, researcher, that did a lot of work on theater in small communities, and she will present today her paper, "There is no folk theater without a supportive community." We have her here. Hi, Anna.
Hello. Hi.
So
Hi.
The podium is yours.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to say hello to all participants and hello to all of you in Ljubljana. Today I will talk about folk theater that is a special kind of amateur theater, but like my when my paper is saying there is no folk theater without the supporting community, and the community in folk theater is very important. Now I will show you my presentation. Just a second. Okay. Share screen. Okay. Okay. Okay, hope that all can see it. So there's no folk theater without a supporting community. My presentation is based on a lot of field work and interviews. And since 2020, I'm gathering data and observing forms of Slovenia folk drama by using ethnographic methods. And in my presentation today, I will try to show how community works in theatrical groups and also in local community. Contemporary folk theater in Slovenia is very active, and many amateur theater companies invest to preserve, narrate, and transmit their local histories and cultural heritage through events and material culture. And folk drama is often understood as opposed to professional or institutional theater. Why we can talk about theater? Because it contains basic theater elements like words, mask, hair, also costume, props, sounds, movement, and also audience. There are a lot of types of folk theater performances. One of them is door-to-door. This is the smallest performance group. But we can also see contemporary folk theater at parades, like in processions, and as part of the program at festivals and fairs. And the public venue and stages are very different. So, in my research, I understand contemporary folk theater like a form of amateur theatrical activity that draws on the past. And this heritage and this past stages and derives it for the audience. And the main element with which the performers perform is the content. They want to wish to preserve and to present their tradition and of the community. Here is some of my interviews that I made, and some of my statement that all my interviewers said. So, like that they want to play in a dialect because this is a balm and it's a part of them, and the dialect gives them strength. So that is something that they want to show in their performance. They also said that their performance and the content is kind of somewhere from some time in our local history. Of course, there's also a bit of fantasy, but all is taken from history, and that they try that is kind of authentic. They want to show real people, and with these stories and with performances, they want to remember them. Performance ensembles and troops consist of amateur individuals who have the pleasure of imitation, writing, creating. For drama groups, you need performers of different genders, different ages, statuses, and occupations. This is very important because in these groups, there are also children, kids, there are also seniors. It's not about the age who can join the group. The theater groups are organized as voluntary associations, and this type of organization has a deep impact on nature of the groups and their role in community life. Interactions between group members are characterized by artistic communication. This is why they join the group, because they want to be creative. They feel that they can show their talent through the theater. And this is why they join such group. I think that they want to show their heritage, and creativity depends on the social environment and on the inner motivation of the audience. We must know that such folk theater performances, they are not in every local community. They're not in all parts of Slovenia. There are some parts where they are more common, and there are some parts where there we can see no such performances. And creative action is promoted by institutions in society, and to move the world, it must resonate with emotions of people. And here comes heritage. Heritage of the community creates and strengthens the common identity in the group. And like in my research, I can see that the content contributes to the participation of individuals, because the content is linked to the heritage and is therefore close to the members of the local community, and they want to show it. And it's known to all of individuals who are joined in this group. But on the other hand, in my opinion, this is precisely the way of amateur theatric creations, because theater and amateur theater allows each individual to join in the preparation of the event, either through his own or her own knowledge and offer. We know that there is no just in such groups, like in all amateur theater groups, there are also people who don't want to stage it, stage on the stage, perform on the stage, but they can join with other talent, maybe for making props or scene or helping with music. So this kind of activity allows everyone to join in preparation of the event. I think that creativity has the power of making connection through creation, and individuals come together in productive ways. As cultural geographer Hawkins said, one of the key dimensions of discussion around making and connecting has been an attention to how the actual practices of creating come together and come to form communities. Because through creativity and through all kinds of talents, these form communities. And so my central idea is around making. So making theater, making folk theater, and how this making helps to build communities, because in folk theater there can join all amateurs. There are no professionals, and it can join everyone who wants to participate in such. And that's why I also see an amateur theater making as a social and relational practice, which is reliant on cooperation, collaboration, and participation in a shared space, like its local community, because it's very narrow. They all work in a local community. There's no mixture or something from other communities. So it's very shaped in space. And also this creates dynamic in communities. But in theater, making take place in rehearsal process. This is the basic. So there are two interrelated ideas of community that I want to show in my presentation. There is a specific community of practice, so the amateur theater community, which is brought together by interest. There are also the implication that these communities have consequences on the wider community. In this picture, I want to show all the participants that are involved in one of kind of folk theater presentation. So they are not just actors. They are also people who just want to join and want to play, want to join the group. So it's a wider community that's come into play. So first is theater community, and for amateur theater makers, the time pressure for productions provides an important thing that people do forms of craft knowledge to collaborate. It's part of the power of the experience, and they want to be creative together. And when people rehearse, build sets, designs, and make costumes and props together, they build the foundations for social bonds. And in contrast to more individualized forms of amateur craft, amateur theater is dependent on social networks, friendships, shared histories. They have their own jokes, playfulness, and rituals in many of these groups. Participants often employ the rhetoric and emotional history of family when they talk about their theater group. They say they are like family. And amateur theater makers are doers. And so there's not unusual to find members that have multiple roles in their community. There are some people, some individuals who are in all associations in the community. So they are at firefighters, they are in tourist association, they are in theater association. So they are doers, and they have multiple roles in their community. So liveness of theatrical experience is valued as a socially generative force. This is not only raises questions about the relationship between the rehearsal process and the production, but it also draws attention to the temporal quality theater and its power to affect communities. And how its impact on local community. Folk theater is often defined by its localism, and it's very integral to many communities in local communities. And both creators and their social groups are motivated by powerful desire, which is grounded in their space and their heritage they inhabit. What is all in common is their personal memory, is their known history, and it's all about connections and all what is formed and what inform it. So shared memories, it's very important. But what is important in local communities, that folk theater and local community must go hand in hand in conducting the event. There would be no cases of folk theater if the actor did not have support from the local community. The annual rhythm of folk theater defines lives, and for those with a long-term commitment to folk theater, working lives are organized around the calendar of performances. We have also an examples where people and performers take vacation, that they can join some of the performances. They want to be part of it. The organizers have to coordinate their performances with the other event going on local community. For example, they have to take into account the local holidays, the events that are done with other fellow citizens. They have to consider with events that in parish or in. It's everything. They have to know which time and which hour is the most appropriate for this performance. Because maybe in some rural areas and some villages, there's also work in the field and around the house, and there are also some things that people do, and so that's why organizers have to coordinate all their performance with the other events. And the whole community is involved in organizing events, like not just performance, but the individuals are involved in the preparations of different levels, like preparations of the food that is serving, or the preparation of the room and all the accompanying program. Involved are different associations like firefighters, other sports and touristic associations, also kindergarten and schools. Very important is financial support and encouragement from local institutions. This is very important for folk theater. And also in rural environment, it's also important support of church authority, because some of the events can show in the stages in the public space or the space of the church authority. And it's also like my informant says, it's very important that church authority says, yeah, it's okay that this event is going on, and that's why also the more people is included, because the support this support. So folk theater as a situated practice rooted in place helps build dynamic communities through the process of making, as well the occasions it creates for social gathering of makers, company members, and audience. This is where folk theater so creates social gathering for all people in community. conclusion, I want to say that folk theater is social activity that creates successful communities. The significance and cultural value of making folk theater stretches far beyond what is pursued on stage and what can we see on stage. Unlike some forms of amateur creativity, theater making depends upon collaboration and regular interactions. Folk theater companies contribute to defining a sense of place and creating community, not only in the process of making, but also through their deep-rooted relations with loyal audience. We have to recognize the shared knowledge and know-how that amateurs possess, the friendship, the informal networks that inspires, the ways in which it shapes lives and defines communities, and contribute to placemaking. So that is why I think that folk theater and that community works in such things like it's folk theater. In a small, so as I can show you, it works in a small group like a theatrical group, but also on wider sphere like its local community. Okay.
Please. Thank you, Anna, for this presentation. Maybe just to open a discussion, you're talking about folk theater and amateur theater. It seems to me that you're sort of talking about two different things. On one hand, of course, this folk theater, maybe in Slovenian it should be ljudsko gledališče or something.
Yes.
Be achieved only in really small communities, where the theater sort of covers almost the whole community. On the other hand, of course, we have amateur theaters that are big, that are like Šentjakobsko gledališče,
yes.
that are working as theater institutions, as theater groups, and so on and so forth. So this would be the first question, whether these are very much different, and you would suggest also that we use a different term, because now we know in Slovenia we have this government fund that is funding those things, and for them this is all the same.
Yes. Yeah, I see folk theater like one part of amateur theaters. Well, we have amateur theaters, like you said, they are more organizational and more, they can be bigger. But one part is also folk theater, because as I see in my research, all these folk theaters, performances, and people who do these performances, they come from amateur groups, from this folk amateur theater group. So I don't know, in one town or one village, they have their own amateur group, which deals with other drama theater performances. But for some occasions, they want to play their local event. So the bigger part of these performances come from amateur group, from local amateur group, but they also do these folk theater performances, which are different.
So it's not just how they are organized and where they are organized, but even more specifically, what kind of performances they do. So it can be the same group, but you would say with one performance, it is a folk theater. With another performance, it is an amateur theater.
Yeah, Yeah, and but yeah, it's how they organize it. And in folk theater, the whole community can collaborate. They they join. They can join also children. Also join. I don't know. Društvo podeželskih žena. Everyone who wants to collaborate, everyone who wants to participate can join this part of folk theater. But in the amateur theater, there is how to say, it's their own organization. There are only some participants, theater makers.
Now I give the word to Alma. She has a question.
I have a short question. So when we go to yeah, you hear me?
Okay.
I can hear you. Yeah. Okay, I can hear you.
So when we go to the stage of like a repertory theater or like independent theater in urban areas, we really know which themes to expect, and we rarely miss. So what are the most common themes in the folk plays? And the sub question is, these are, you were really stressing building the community. So communities usually circle around very narrow perspectives of themselves, or very clear ones. So do these plays ever challenge this? And are like some stereotypes ever challenged?
Okay, for first
to be
question.
I would guess that in maybe this is a wrong assumption, but I would guess that like female roles are very stereotypical in most cases. Or am I very wrong?
No, you're right. Yeah, these are a lot of stereotypic roles, and the content on which you also question about is very different. You name it. It's a lot. It's from folk tales, well, legends from Slovenia, or just about people that lived once upon a time in one community. For instance, in Prevorje, near Kozjansko, there we have stories about Guzej. He was like a Robin Hood. He's like Slovenian Robin Hood, and they all perform stories about him, about how he robbed rich ones and how he gave the poor ones, and all about his, because this is all stories lived in local memory. We don't, I presume that maybe Gaspar don't know the stories about the Guzej, but no, but in this local area, all people know about the Guzej. So it's kind of stories that lives in the community. Or maybe in Krvava Peć, there is a story from Ottoman attack, how the Krvava Peć have got its name, because in the legend, former was Rožna vas, but because of Ottoman attack and because some girls were killed in this accident, that's why this village is now called Krvava Peć. And they stages it. So this performer group, they one of the locals write the scenario, write the text, and they perform it. So there are very different stories.
Can I ask a question connected to the previous question?
Of course.
I thought that perhaps you would answer it in this answer, but you somehow didn't. So I want to be clear about something. You said that these folk theaters somehow revive the history, local stories that you mentioned as examples. When they do, what is the approach? Do they just repeat them? I mean, in a different media, because they are no longer told or written, they are presented in theater?
Yes.
Or do they reinterpret them? Are there any versions that are sort of new versions, in any way, critical, non-critical, invented, or they just sort of try to preserve the history in some way?
in some way they want to preserve it, but it's very also in, I know, there's a lot of they add new characters, they add new names. They it's the main content is stays like it should be, but there are
So they're not challenged. I mean, the stories in a way. It's not. They're not presented as this is not true.
No. They want to show it as much as authentic. They want to have. Yeah.
They respect the heritage. This is the basic.
Yes. They're not
attitude.
inventing it. But they have a lot of how to say it? They want to preserve this heritage, and they are very they want to show it to other persons. So they are very how to say it, proud. They are very proud of their they are very proud of this heritage, and they want to show it in this kind of media. It's kind of theater. They want to show them to other persons. It's also for tourists and something, not just for local community. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
More questions? Well, Anna, you partly answered the question that I had in this last comment, but maybe to clarify it a little bit more. Sometimes I feel that these folk theater performances were born as a community thing, so as something that the community shares and gets connected through them. But nowadays, it seems that in many cases, it just becomes a touristic product or something to promote a village for other people. Is this sort of a decay of folk theater and its intentions, or, I don't know, an opportunity?
All my interviews and also in my research, it shows also, like you said, it's on one hand, it's something that people want to be that's their own, something that support the community. On the other hand, they want to show it for touristic attractions. And I don't know if this is wrong or it's not the, I don't know. Well, me, like ethnologist, I just observe how this is going and in which way it's going. We don't know. I don't say it's wrong. I'm just an observer, because it's very funny when I was there and I observe performances. No one of these troops asked me for opinion. They are just like, okay, we are doing our thing and we are proud of it and we think it's okay and we are doing our way. No one is ever asked me, okay, you're ethnologist, so are we doing right? Is this okay? No, it's just okay. This is how we do, and it's how we can do it. It was very funny, yeah.
And maybe the last question, from this theatrical point of view.
Okay.
Seems to me, like Vishnya said, once these performances want to go a step further, so to question what they are doing or to make a more complex show, is it that at that time, at that stage, the whole community, of course, cannot rely to this and cannot participate? Is this the limit of this, what you're talking about, folk theater? And is this happening? Is this happening sometimes, that you have individuals that want more and then just it goes away?
Yes, yes, of course. This is not only, there are not only positive ways of this folk theater and community bonding, and there are also examples where community falls apart because of one folk theater event, because there are things about, of course, money, because some of them, yeah, of course, they said some of them want to maybe earn some, or and then the other participants said, so you have these things and you earned on our community. So it's about money, and it's also about some other things that are common in all communities, like gossiping, and when one of the actors goes, then also some part of the community also goes with him.
So this is, I said the last question, but
no, it's okay. Yeah.
You were saying that this is the show that unites the community, but what I found is sort of strange, and you basically are getting there with your sentence.
Yeah.
Is it actually the show they are watching, or is it just their friends, their relatives, and I don't know, the props that they made? So is it just the fact that they participated, or is it really the show, the myth, the local myth behind it?
I think it's both, because it's also the local myth, because they said, because this is all of my interviewers, which I interview, they said they want to participate because this is their heritage. This is their thing, and their kind of have, how to say it, they want to be part of it, because they don't want to be that part of community that it's not the part of all this folk theater performance. But and they want to join it, and so they can join maybe just with preparing food, and not with acting, but maybe with preparing food, or with preparing stage, or just something like this. It's this is maybe just a new topic for for a debate. Yeah, it's really, how to say it? Yeah, I think it's not topic for a new debate. how heritage is understand, and how these people really are participating this kind of theater.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Do we have some more questions? No? This is the end of this first part of the third panel. We will meet again at 11:30 online or live to continue with Nika discussion.